So welcome everybody. I know a lot of you. I see a few new faces. So welcome to the Psychedelic Society of Arkansas Education Night for July. As you well know, we're going to be talking with Kemi Sadler. I call her Kemi. She goes by KL Sadler.
You can call me Kemi.
Can I?
Yeah.
Okay, good. She goes by Kemi in the book. So first of all, I just need to do the disclaimer. Here at the Psychedelic Society of Arkansas, we are working towards education, advocacy, and risk reduction for the safe and ethical use of psychedelic medicines. As always, we don't give any medical advice, and we also do not source, so don't ask. We'd like to just introduce Kemi also for a moment. So I met Kemi at our symposium for the first time just a year ago, this July. So since I met Kemi, we got to know each other a little bit, and I was able to go with my husband Joseph out to Kemi's land in the Ozarks. And you'll read about Kemi's land in her book. It's a beautiful, magical place and a sacred place.
Yeah.
It's land that has obviously seen some very magical things.
Yes.
And so maybe you'll tell us a little bit about that.
I will now.
But Kemi is a retired federal agent with the Secret Service, is that?
Yeah, U.S. State Department.
U.S. State Department. And has a story of healing that's really inspirational. Just by a show of hands, how many have already read Kemi's book? Okay, so a few of you.
Okay.
But a few of you haven't. So hopefully you'll feel inspired tonight. We have quite a few copies of the book here that will be available for purchase and signing after the talk. And I'm just going to let you take it away.
Okay. Well, I'd like to start by saying thank you. Because none of this would have been possible without you and you introducing me to Yannette, my editor, who played a major role, obviously, in getting this ready for publishing. So thank you both.
I'm going to just step over here and let you talk, and then
Okay.
I can return when you're ready for some conversation or questions.
Okay. All right. So I was invited to speak tonight both about the book and the Camino. About 2 weeks after the book was released, not even 2 weeks, I set foot on a pilgrimage across Spain. I think partly just to take a step from what was a very intense year of writing the book and getting it ready to release, which was it was easy to write. It was not so easy to release. So as Beth mentioned, I'm retired law enforcement. I retired from the U.S. State Department in 2024 after 26 years as a sworn law enforcement officer. This is also the first time I've done this, so bear with me if it's a little bit clunky. But I started as a police officer in St. Augustine, Florida, local police, and then a few years later became a federal agent with the U.S. State Department. And over the course of my career, the biggest irony in being here tonight doing something like this is that for over 20 years, I wanted no online presence whatsoever. I would Google myself every 6 months, and if I found any kind of thing pop up, I would reach out to that website and say, you have to take this down. You're potentially putting my identity at risk. And I was so successful in that endeavor that to this day, when I apply for a credit card and they do the automatic, which car did you own, which address did you live at, there's still not enough information in the commercial databases to verify I'm a real person, and I can't even get a new credit card because I so successfully deleted myself from the public space. So to be here now talking about a deeply personal memoir is a bit of a 180, you might say. So you might be asking, how did that happen? How do you get from that to being completely open and putting literally, everything out there in the world? Ayahuasca is the answer to that. Ayahuasca and Joe Rogan, who I sent a copy of the book and said thank you, but I haven't heard back from him yet. So it was on a Joe Rogan podcast that I first heard ayahuasca being discussed. He was speaking with Graham Hancock, and they were discussing this drug with respect and reverence, and it didn't fit anything I knew to be true. I grew up as a product of the war on drugs, and what I knew was that all drugs were bad. And as a local police officer, I'd arrested people for marijuana, crack cocaine, other drugs. And the way that they were speaking about ayahuasca and how it was a conduit to a higher power, and people having profound experiences with healing, veterans and others, flipped a switch in my head is really the only way I can describe that. I became I had to know more about it, which started a really deep dive into psychedelics. I accumulated so many books on psychedelics that I actually built a little bookcase out of scrap lumber, and which I still have. It's my psychedelic library. And at the end of that, I guess you could call it an investigation, I realized that I no longer believed that all drugs were bad. And not only that, I believed that there had been agendas behind convincing the public that they were, which was a bit of an awkward place to find myself in, having been, 2 years from retirement at that point, almost a quarter of a century serving the system I was now questioning. But I decided that, having concluded my investigation, when I retired, I was going to seek this opportunity out. And I was actively searching places in South America to do that when I retired, when I learned of an ayahuasca church about 2 hours from where I was living in Orlando. It would seem that the universe was putting into my path an opportunity to pursue this thing that would not leave me alone. I could not get it out of my head. And despite the fact that I had researched all the psychedelics, I kept coming back to ayahuasca. Even though, there are numerous accounts of people saying how difficult it is, I still felt very drawn to it. So I retired, and I went to a ceremony. That is actually the temple that I go to in South Florida. And the picture on the left, that's actually the flowers of the ayahuasca vine. It looks like a very gentle, it's not the flowers that are part of the ayahuasca, but it looks like a very gentle plant, but it is not. So I went to a ceremony, and the first time I went just for one night, and nothing happened. I drank 4 cups of ayahuasca, and nothing happened. And I felt unworthy and very disappointed. And I sought out Inti, who's now my spiritual leader, and I said, I don't understand. Why didn't it work? And he said, do you smoke a lot of marijuana? I said, I've never smoked marijuana, not once. He said, well, what do you do for work? I said, well, I'm just retired law enforcement. And he was like, He just kind of got this knowing look, and was like, yeah, we see this a lot with people who work in the military and law enforcement, paramedics, people who have to maintain composure in a crisis. You develop coping skills and the ability to compartmentalize things so that you're not having an emotional response, at a tragic event, or trying to process something emotional when it's not an appropriate time to process it, and you spend, in my case, 26 years doing that. Those walls don't come down so easy. So he suggested that I come back for 3 days, and said, sometimes the mind is like a coconut. It takes more than one crack to knock it open. So I did that. I went back. It took a couple of months to kind of think about what it was that I wanted out of it. The main thing that drew me to ayahuasca was grief, specifically the loss of a woman that I worked with in Iraq in 2006, and also the loss of my father probably about 10 years before my first ceremony. And I knew I needed healing with that, with those losses, but if you'd asked me, I would have said, that's it. I don't have any other, issues. I'm fine. Everything's good. But underneath that was not the case. And I didn't understand that until ayahuasca started to take those layers, because inside that coconut was an onion, and ayahuasca started peeling the layers of that onion, and I very soon realized that I was not so okay as I thought, that I was carrying. I was carrying stuff that I wasn't even aware I was carrying. So I went back. Let's see. I wrote 20 pages of notes. I'm trying to do it without referencing it, but give me just a second because I feel like I skipped something. Yeah. Okay. So I did in my job with the State Department. The State Department's very much like the military, where you take an assignment and you kind of travel around the world. So I did tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. I did a tour in Iraq in 2006 to 2007, and I was in Afghanistan in 2004 for a short period of time, and then again for a year in 2017 to 2018. And the year that I was in, just as an example of kind of things that I didn't really realize I was carrying, in the year that I was in Iraq in 2006, there was a ammo depot that got hit by a rocket. And so everything that was inside that bunker started to go off and just fly in every direction with no real intended target. And at the time I lived in a Connex box, we called them hooches, and one side of my Connex box had sandbags against it. And so I laid down on the floor on that side where the sandbags were. I covered myself with a Kevlar blanket, put my helmet on, took 2 Benadryl on top of whatever I'd been drinking that night, and woke up in the morning with a stiff neck and went back to work. And that's just what you did. You just go back to work. And it wasn't until, so I went from that assignment in Iraq to an assignment in Uganda. And when I got to Uganda, I started having like some mood swings and feeling irritable and emotional and these things. And I was taking methylquin at the time, which is an anti-malarial, and it can have some side effects like nightmares and things like that. So I'd stopped taking it because I figured that's what it was. It couldn't be PTSD because I hadn't been blown up. I hadn't actually lost a limb or suffered, anything like that. So I knew it wasn't PTSD. It had to be something else. So I stopped taking the methylquin, and then when that didn't work, for the only time in my career with State Department, I sought out someone to talk to about Emil, the woman that I mentioned that had passed when I was in Iraq. And I had a complete breakdown. I don't know how he even understood what I was saying because I was crying so hard. And he said that I was suffering from survivor's guilt. So I checked the box. Now I knew what it was, had a name, filed it away, and went back to work. And then fast forward, I go to a ceremony, I walk into a room with 20 strangers, and I think I'm going to just let all these defenses down and surrender to the medicine. And my ego was like, we'll see about that. So I went and spent a couple of months really trying to think about what it was that I wanted out of ayahuasca, and I went back for 3 days, and where it's 3 ceremonies over a weekend. And in the very first ceremony, Mother Ayahuasca beat me up pretty hard. And she started with grief, but it was not the grief that I knew I needed to deal with. It was the grief for my brother. That's my father on the left. He was a dentist. I know he doesn't look like a dentist in that picture, and that's Emil in the middle, the Iraqi woman that I worked with. And on the right there is my younger brother, who had died only a couple of months before I started this journey, and who I'd been so angry with that it didn't even occur to me I needed to grieve him. And in that ceremony, which was probably one of the most difficult ceremonies I've had, I came to a very clear understanding that he wasn't the only one that handled the relationship poorly, that I could have handled it better, and I could have been a better support, and that I needed to forgive myself for how I had handled my relationship with him, not just seek his forgiveness for the way that he had behaved. He had struggled with addiction. When he died he was a heroin addict, and he had caused a lot of damage, let's say, in the family. So, I had convinced myself that writing him off was setting boundaries, which anyone who has a family member that's struggled with addiction knows boundaries are important. But that was the first lesson that ayahuasca taught me. And in that same ceremony, I saw that there has to be balance between forces like joy and sorrow, that I had carried so much sorrow from the loss of Emil and the other things that had happened, throughout my career, that I had just shut out laughter and joy, and I felt that come rushing back in with an understanding that you have to make room for both. You can't just carry sorrow. And I think that was when I realized that while I had not gone looking for God, that I had found it. Like, that was the turning point, that ceremony, that I left understanding that this was more than just something that was going to give me healing from grief or whatever. It was a conduit to the divine. So I wanted to know, as I said, how many layers there were in that onion. So I kept going back. I did 16 ceremonies in about 2 years, which I don't recommend. Many of them were very difficult. One in particular where just one second. Ayahuasca has a way of helping you connect dots in your life that you wouldn't otherwise see. And there was a ceremony where I was able to see and understand why I had always had such a hard time asking for help and feeling like I had to do everything by myself. And at some point, there was I'm skipping around now, I apologize, but the book. So most of the ceremonies up until this point were about those dots, like being able to connect those dots to understand all of the things that happened in my life that had caused me to react in certain ways, to become jaded and sarcastic and to drink too much, and all the things that I'd been carrying that I didn't realize until I was able to see it in hindsight. And I had a ceremony where it was the first time that I had if you'd asked me before I started this journey with ayahuasca what a psychedelic trip was like, having had no experience with psychedelics, I would have said, colors and visions and all of this. And that was not my experience with ayahuasca at all. For me, ayahuasca typically feels like a guided meditation where I feel the presence of a guide, and my thoughts weave through lessons that I need to learn and being able to piece together, parts of my story. And this was the first time that was not what happened. The ceremony started with vivid colors and a vision and a beautiful carpet, Native American indigenous carpet laid out, a big adobe arena all filled with women, and their backs were to me, and it was grandmothers and mothers and daughters. And I was standing at the back of the arena looking in, and in front of all of these women was a place for someone to come and speak, and there was a big bonfire. And I was wondering who they were waiting for, and then I realized that I was supposed to go up there and tell my story, and that maybe by telling my story I could help others like me who didn't realize that they had things they needed to heal from. And when I left that ceremony, the book came to me like a download. Like I couldn't type fast enough to get it out onto paper. I had 70,000 words on my laptop in about 12 days. And I left that ceremony in Florida, and I drove to Washington, D.C. because I had to catch a flight overseas. And I drove 12 hours from Florida to D.C. doing talk-to-text notes on my phone, because it was just like, I'm like, if I don't, write it down or record it, I'm going to lose it. And then I wrote the whole way overseas, and the next week, just it poured out of me. And it was about a year to the day that I started writing it to when I had a proof copy in my hand, thanks largely to my editor here who helped me get it to polished. And so I wrote the book, released it, and it was a really vulnerable thing to do because it's a pretty raw reckoning of my past and mistakes and things I'd never told anybody, in my life or in that book. And I had wanted to walk the Camino when I retired, and I had surgery on my foot a couple of months before I retired. So I ended up not being able to do that, and I ended up on this other journey with ayahuasca. And when I finished the book, I live in Belgium right now, and I was in Belgium as I was getting it ready to publish, and realized that I'm quite a bit closer to the Camino, and maybe I should go ahead and do that, and that would be a good kind of way to decompress from writing it. And what I understand now is that I was meant to walk it 2 years later. It was meant to unfold exactly as it did, and this should play a video. So I walked the Camino, and I did it as a awareness campaign that I called Nona's Way. So I did Nona's Way as an awareness campaign to raise awareness for mental health and suicide prevention among first responders. The suicide rate among first responders is almost up there with veterans. For many of the same reasons, I think. And there's also a lot of overlap between the veteran community and the law enforcement community. And we carried with us the names of 56 officers who died by suicide. Took us 37 days. And I walked it with my dog, Nona. Okay, so what I didn't understand when I planned the Camino was that the Camino became integration. Like, I had heard about integration as I was researching psychedelics and deciding, where I was going to land on that, but it didn't make sense to me until after, I was on that journey with ayahuasca, and you have this, or with, it's the same with other psychedelics, as I understand, but you have this profound understanding, but then you have to go back to your same life and your same triggers and your same, everything is the same. And how do you incorporate that lesson into your life? That's integration. And when I wrote the book, I really tried hard to make sure to get that message across, that it's not that these plants are going to fix us. These plants are going to make it possible for us to pause and understand what's happening inside so that we can take a moment and make a different decision or redirect. And when I set off on the Camino, I thought that I understood that. I thought that I had done that, rather, like that I had integrated all those lessons into my life. There's a big difference between understanding the lessons and actually incorporating them into your life, which is why I say the Camino that I walked in 2026 was not the one that I would have walked in 2024, but it was the one that I was absolutely meant to walk. And I was meant to walk it with Nona. And this is Nona. This is another video that she's half Great Pyrenees and half red-tick coonhound. I got her on a Facebook, just a random Facebook ad, her and her brother Newton. And when she was 3 months old, she had to have a blood transfusion. We almost lost her. And they said she'll be on meds for the rest of her life. She's, don't expect her to live very long. And Nona had other plans. This dog has more energy. I walked 780 kilometers across Spain, and I was not able to wear her out. So she's just a lot of fun. Hi, I'm Kemi, and this is Nona. In April 2026, Nona and I began walking the Camino de Santiago, a 780-kilometer pilgrimage across northern Spain. We called the walk Nona's Way, and we walked to raise awareness for first responder mental health and suicide prevention, carrying the names of 56 first responders lost to suicide. I learned many lessons along the Camino, including one very simple one. Sometimes it's all you can do to put one foot in front of the other and keep going. There is a word often shared among those who walk the Camino: ultrea. It means go further. When we got home, I realized that just because the walk had ended, Nona's Way and the message to keep going did not have to. So today, Nona's Way is continuing. Through storytelling, we hope to continue carrying the same message forward, that healing is possible, that no one should have to walk alone, and that sometimes it begins with small steps, shared journeys, and the courage to keep going, especially when it's hard. Our first project, a children's book called Nona's Way, The Search for the Perfect Stick. It's inspired by Nona's Camino adventure. It's a story about learning to walk together, told from Nona's perspective. Because learning that it's okay to share the weight of the journey, to ask for help, and to keep going with someone beside you should begin long before life teaches us to build a tough exterior and carry too much alone. The Camino ended, Nona's Way has not. If you'd like to learn more and get updates about our projects, please visit nonasway.com and sign up for Nona's News. The idea to walk the Camino with Nona, because she's half Great Pyrenees and the French route of the Pyrenees Mountains the French route of the Camino starts in the Pyrenees Mountains. So that's kind of how the idea came to me to walk it with Nona.
Meet Nona. Half Great Pyrenees, half red tick coonhound. Nona came into my life when she was just 8 weeks old, after a random Facebook post in Harrison, Arkansas. When Nona was only 3 months old, we almost lost her. A severe allergic reaction to a puppy vaccine led to an emergency blood transfusion and a prognosis of lifelong medications. But Nona had other plans. Within a few months, she was off medication and unstoppable. She grew into a dog that was curious, stubborn, gentle, goofy, and fully committed to investigating the world around her. So when I decided to walk the Camino Frances, beginning in the Pyrenees Mountains, Nona's ancestral home, I could not shake the feeling that Nona should come with me. And so she did. In April 2026, Nona and I began our 780-kilometer walk across Spain. We named the walk Nona's Way and walked to raise awareness for first responder mental health and suicide prevention. This is the real Nona, the dog behind the story. The Camino has ended, but Nona's Way has not. Follow the next chapter at nonasway.com.
As I was walking the Camino, it often occurred to me that it kept reminding me of things that I had learned in ceremonies with ayahuasca. But it wasn't until I started to prepare for this event tonight that I really understood what that entailed, I guess. And Beth invited me to speak about the book and the Camino, and that's when I realized that it was integration. The Camino for me was integration, because walking it with Nona, I would have made the Camino into another mission, a thing to accomplish, which a lot of people do. They set out in the morning and they got their end destination and they are on trajectory to hit that. And without Nona, I would have done the same thing. But Nona wouldn't let me. I couldn't cheat with Nona because I had to put her needs ahead of my own. So I couldn't just power through. I couldn't just keep going. I couldn't make it into a mission. And I had to very early in the trip learn to surrender to the flow of the Camino, because Nona stopped at every interesting smell. She played with every single stick, and she was either tugging on me to catch up to the people ahead of us, or she was stopped and smelling something. And the first halfway into the first day, it was either Nona, let's go, or Nona, stop pulling. And after about, 10 kilometers of that, I was like, it's her Camino too. And if she wants to stop, we're going to stop. And so I'm like, I'm literally walking across the entire country, and as long as it takes as long as it takes. So why am I in a hurry? Why am I, worried about trying to go fast and get there? We'll just take our time. So I surrendered to that very, very early. And then the next lesson was, I mentioned the ceremony about asking for help, which some people have read the book and they'll know exactly the one that I'm referring to. And it was probably not even a week into the Camino, I got caught in a torrential downpour. And I had gone back and forth on planning lodging ahead. I ended up not doing that for a couple of reasons. One is that people say the Camino will provide and you should just go and kind of figure it out as you go. And the other reason was it's very difficult to find pet-friendly lodging from afar, and I thought, well, I'll have better luck in the moment. Well, about 4 days in, it was raining. We'd walked for hours. I couldn't find a single place that would take us I was sitting under a tractor trailer in the pouring rain. Nona was curled up in a ball and shivering. And, my old self and mindset, those old habits that were ingrained in me were like, I'm just going to sit here under this tractor trailer and it'll be okay. We'll just, spend the night here. And I look at this dog that's shivering, who trusts me completely and doesn't care at all about my pride or my ego to not take shortcuts and to walk every single kilometer and to do it, this way. That just made no sense all of a sudden. And so I called my wife, who was back in Brussels, and she used Nona's Nona's GPS tracker to figure out where we were in the middle of nowhere. And sent a taxi, somehow managed to find a taxi that would take a dog, because finding transportation that's pet friendly in Spain is also not so easy. Sent us a taxi to the middle of nowhere and got us a room at the Holiday Inn Express about 30 kilometers down the road. So accepting that, help was difficult, but also made me realize how much, I thought I had learned this lesson, and yet I found myself in a situation where I needed help, and it was still hard to ask for it. And then when Erin said she would just book me all the way through to Santiago, I said, yes, please do that. So, I tried to keep our distances at about 20 kilometers a day, but sometimes we had to go a little bit further because of where we could find lodging. And there was one day in particular that was probably about 26 kilometers, which is on the upper end of what I would do with her. If it went beyond that, I would try to get a cab or a bus or something, so that we weren't doing more than 26 kilometers, which is about probably 15 miles. I don't know. Somebody maybe does better conversion math than me, but so there's this particular day that I'm thinking of. We stopped about 5 kilometers from our end point, and Nona laid down in the grass, and I took my shoes off and had a snack and sat there for 20-30 minutes and got up to go. And normally when I would even reach for my backpack, Nona was on her feet and, all right, let's go. And she picked her head up and she looked at me. She put her head back down in the grass and lay down, and I was like, okay. So I sat back down and rested for another probably 30 minutes or so, and then reached for my bag again, and this time she got up. Because she knows when she's tired, and she rests, and that was a lesson that had always been hard for me, was to listen to my body and know what it's telling me and when it's time to rest. And so Nona made it hard for me to cheat on all of the lessons that I needed to really fully integrate and not just understand. And because we carried that list, it felt like a heavy thing. And the Camino, for some people walk the Camino for every reason, and some of them I think just walk it for fun. And it drove me nuts that people were on vacation and having a good time. And Nona made it impossible for me to be that serious, because she's just ridiculous. I mean, she's just goofy dog, and she just does the most ridiculous things. And so she really helped to balance out that, kind of the heavy part of what we were doing, and remind me to find the joy in the simple moments, and to carry, not to try and carry everything, but to try and carry what matters. So because I had Nona with me, I had to carry, she did have a little, some of the pictures you see, she has a little backpack. It had dehydrated liver treats and a collapsible water bottle. I did not make her carry anything that was heavy, but I carried the dog food and the things that I needed for extra water and things I needed for her. So my pack was heavier than is recommended. And about probably 2 weeks into the trip, my feet hurt really, really bad. And I had to stop and get a different pair of shoes, and I started to transport some of the weight ahead. And I did that until we got 100 kilometers from Santiago, which is the minimum distance you need to actually complete the Camino. And then I took it the full weight back because I felt like it was the difference between suffering needlessly and suffering for growth, for understanding, for like being able to appreciate that nuance and when to it was more articulate in my notes, but and then also Nona made it impossible for me to just isolate myself and be the loner that I tend to be, because she greeted everyone and everyone wanted to meet her, and so they would come up to meet Nona and kind of meet me in the process. And initially I felt like she was kind of slowing me down, and people wouldn't stop and walk with us because we would stop and they would keep going. And initially that felt like, I'm not going to have that Camino family that people talk about, meet that group of people that travel the whole Camino together. But I realized Nona had become almost a filter, because the people who did walk with us were the ones who valued the conversation and who were willing to slow down and connect with us. And we made some really good connections and some good friends along the way. And lastly, the lesson that Nona taught me more than any other is just that to approach everything from a place of love, and shed the armor and find the joy and the love, and learn how to walk in that light. And I'm working on the audiobook, and I may be working on some other stuff. We'll see. I'll talk to Jeanette later. See. Yeah. Thank you.
You mentioned earlier about integration. What could you give us the 2 or 3 things that you did integrate into your life that you were able to see on your walk that you couldn't see before?
Yes. Trying to think of something. Nothing is coming immediately to mind. I think the biggest thing for me really is being willing to just accept help on any level, like, and asking people to walking it with Nona was really hard, because Spain is not pet friendly. So like I couldn't even often like go into a restaurant to have a meal, or go into a museum or anything. It just wasn't an option unless I had a place or someone to leave her with. And I was able to find people to kind of help me, watch her, so I could go in and buy groceries or do things like that. And even like asking just people to do things like that before would have been difficult. Yeah.
Anybody else?
So, Kemi, you did lots of journeys, and you talked about a lot of difficult journeys that you had. Like, did you also have some that were just beautiful or just nice?
Yes. Yes, I say sometimes, like, I feel like I probably dissuade people from doing ayahuasca, which is not my intent at all. Yes, and I think as I've peeled through those layers of the onion, it has gotten easier, but that's also because I've learned to surrender to it more and not let my ego take the driver's seat. Absolutely have had some really beautiful ceremonies. The one with the vision for the book was incredible. It was so vivid I can still see it in my head. And I've had other ceremonies where there was just beautiful. In fact, the one with my brother, and the grief, and as painful as that ceremony was, it ended with light, just pure white light, and everyone that I had lost in my life, and even all of my dogs that I had lost in my life, were all there at the end of that ceremony, and it was absolutely beautiful. Yeah, important to remember that. Yes?
I'm thinking about how intuitive animals are, and I was curious if you had a sense that Nona observed these changes in you as you were laying them out.
Nona and I really kind of came into sync as we walked. I do feel like she just understood everything that was going on. And I stopped pulling on her and she stopped pulling me ahead. So I think yes. And it was so fun to walk with her and see just how people reacted to her. And there were three occasions where, and I've not seen her do this any other time, where she had a sense of someone that she did not want to be around. So she's a very intuitive dog. Yeah.
Kemi, were you able to connect with veterans groups or first responder groups before you left? How did you collect the names? How did people find out about your walk to send the names?
Yeah, I did a number of podcasts, most of which were law enforcement podcasts. And we started up a website, nonaswade.com, where people could go in and submit the names. And some of them came from coworkers. A few of the names were people that I knew and had worked with over the years. And the others came either through the website or just through email for people that heard what we were doing. And we also carried a number of patches from the departments of some of those officers that I sewed onto the back of my pack.
And did you carry those names to the end, or was there a place to lay them, or what's the tradition?
I carried them all the way to the end. I took the list to the Pilgrim's Mass in Santiago, and then I carried it to the end. So a lot of people will go from Santiago to Finisterre, which is, if you walk it, it's another 5 days. I took the bus to the end, just because I didn't have enough time to walk it. But anyway, people will go to the end, and there's a kind of a tradition to release things there at the sea. And so I took the list there and burned it at the sea in an act of release.
What would be, I'm going to come back up here, unless anybody else has any questions right now. Okay. Oh.
What do your former co-workers in law enforcement think about your experiences with ayahuasca?
That's been one of the most interesting things about this journey, because I was very nervous about coming out with my use of psychedelics, if you will. And most of them have asked for more information. And more than a few have said they've been thinking about finding a retreat or a opportunity to use psychedelics for healing.
Anybody else?
I have a friend who lives in Peru, and she changed her whole life after taking ayahuasca.
Yeah.
She had visions that she was not supposed to be a nurse any longer, and she was guided to do pottery and art. And she quit her job, divorced her husband, moved to Mexico. I mean,
Wow.
it was drastic. Now, is that normal?
I don't know if it's normal, but it certainly happens.
Yeah.
I think it depends how much you listen to what the medicine is, how much you're willing to guide it, or how much you're willing to let it guide you.
But she's very happy, so I'm happy for her.
Sounds amazing.
It's like, wow.
There's so much support now, too, for the psychedelics. Well, no, it's okay, I'm too loud anyway, but there's so much support now that it's really helping.
Yes.
You know, law enforcement and military, you know, just with...
Yeah, the veterans have really paved the way in that regard, and it seems like there's a lot of progress. And
how did you come to have land here in Arkansas? How did you come to have land here in Arkansas?
I have a good friend from college who, that's right, you invited me to speak about the land, and I didn't do that. I have a good friend from college who had property here, and I had visited her a number of times over the years, and in 2004 I was visiting, and I just happened to mention while sitting on her porch how beautiful it was, and she said, well, you know, the property next to us is for sale. And so I ended up buying that piece of property in 2004, and then I built a place on it in 2008. Even though I've never lived here, but it's been it's given me great peace of mind to know that it's here when I've been in other places around the world, and it's a place that I've always been able to come to in between assignments or on vacation. And as I've started this journey with ayahuasca, I feel much more connected to Mother Nature and that land in particular. I feel like spiritual things I feel like it's been a place for spiritual healing for a long time. And it feels like that's meant to happen again on that land. So I'm trying to build, I have some Airbnb on it right now, but my hope is to develop it into a retreat where first responders and others could come to heal. Yeah.
Do you mind telling people where to find it on Airbnb, or do you want to keep that on the download?
No, not at all. It's called Tall Pine Grove, and it's in Harrison. If you search the cabin at Tall Pine Grove on VRBO or Airbnb, you'll find it.
Do recommend 10 out of 10. Been there, done that.
Thank you.
Well, I just have a couple more questions for you as well. I think one of the things I was most excited about you talking about was the Camino, even more so than the ayahuasca. And that's a personal excitement I have because I'd like to walk it someday. But it was a surprise to me to hear you talking about the ways in which it became integration for you. And I'd like you to say just a little bit more about what that meant to you, or how you feel about it now. I asked you earlier today, what was your biggest surprise? And you said you were surprised about how hard the journey was. Yeah. We try to get this across, but sometimes the message gets lost because the medicine, in all of its visionary aspects of it, is really the sexy part, right? That's the part that gets the most attention. That's the part that draws people in. But then there's this long walk afterwards. Right. And I love how the Camino has become that metaphor for you. Yeah. So could you say just a little bit more about that long walk of integration and what that's meant to you?
Sure. I often say that before the Camino, for the last year or so, I've said ayahuasca is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The Camino is probably a close second. Like, it was much harder than I anticipated. Because I'm tough. Even after ayahuasca, it beat me down, and I'm not the same tough exterior, but I still consider myself to be, pretty resilient and, able to do hard things. And the Camino really challenged that in ways I didn't expect. I mean, it's not just physically demanding; it's mentally demanding, and then to do it with with Nona, and like it really put me in a position that I feel like I'd never been in before, where I really had to think about what it feels like to be excluded, to not be allowed in somewhere because of something about you. In this case, because I had my faithful companion, we weren't allowed to go. It didn't matter if it was raining and cold and I just wanted to be inside and warm and have something to drink. I couldn't go in. And I can't leave her outside. That's not fair. Or there's nowhere to, if it's sunny or if it's raining or it's like, so I really had to put her needs ahead of my own. And there were times where I just felt so low and dejected because we weren't welcome. I don't think I'd ever been faced with having to consider what that feels like. It was just like one lesson after another. The whole thing was like 37 days of like, okay, you understood it, but you weren't really like living it.
Would you maybe even say that a long walk like that is an altered state in and of itself?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Probably not one I'll do. No, I don't know. I shouldn't say that. A lot of people walk the Camino multiple times, and I met, made several good friends along the way, and several of them, in the way that they talk about the Camino and what it means to them and the life and how they walk the Camino when they need to feel grounded, or they need to reconnect with nature, or they need to, very, very similar to how I feel about ayahuasca. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
For your book, was there a particular chapter that was the most difficult and why? And then second question would be, through this, your book and your experience and the plant medicine use, what would you hope the message for us to be?
Okay. There are two chapters that were very difficult to write and are also the reason that I don't have an audiobook yet, because I still can't read them, without you being able to hear the emotion in my voice. And that's the one about my brother and processing the grief, and the one about Emil and her story. Those still get me. Yeah. As far as the message and the takeaway of the book, was that your question? That what I hope to accomplish with the book is that people understand that there's a need to heal, and that it's okay to accept that. Like, that's normal. It's normal to need to heal and to need to be able to process things, and especially for first responders, what could be more human than witnessing human suffering for years or decades and needing to heal from that? Not that ayahuasca is the answer, not that everybody needs to do ayahuasca or any other psychedelic. It's not for everybody, especially maybe ayahuasca. Because ayahuasca is a mirror. It's going to show you, without all of your BS, because I did that because this, and this is, I had no choice, and, whatever, all the excuses that we throw up to justify all of our things that we do. Ayahuasca is going to show you the mirror without all those excuses, and you have to be willing to see that and accept that. So it's not for everyone, but everybody needs to heal. That's the message.
I think you mentioned 2004 earlier is when you had your first ceremony.
No. I bought my land in Arkansas in 2004.
Okay.
I retired in 2024, so my first ceremony was in 2024.
So most recently.
Yeah, 2 years about.
When did it come to you first, and when did you decide to consume it?
I heard about ayahuasca on the Joe Rogan podcast probably about 2 years before I retired, and then I spent about 2 years investigating, if you will, and ultimately deciding I was going to find a way to do it.
Is that the only psychedelic that you've done, or have you done others?
I've done mushrooms. Yeah. Much gentler. For me.
So you had that conversation about the long walk being an altered state, and we've experienced that. So everything happens in layers. So the Camino was your integration for your ayahuasca work. What have you experienced in integrating the Camino into daily life?
That's a great question. I'm still working on that one. I think the Camino gave me an appreciation for slowing things down. I'm still somebody who gets very passionate about a project, and I just can't take breaks from it. And so I'm really trying to be better about that, to be more intentional about just taking time for me just to be. Because on the Camino, that's when you finish walking, that's all you want to do is just, you don't want to do anything. Like people take books or whatever, like forget it. You're just going to sit and veg and, maybe wash your one change of clothes in the sink and then, wait to do it all over again tomorrow. And so I've really tried to be better about just being in the moment and finding the simple things that you wouldn't notice if you didn't slow down.
Any other questions? I'm hearing myself through the mic. That's awesome. It's working. Well, thank you so much, Kemi. We want to have some time for you to purchase a book and for Kemi to sign it. But before we do that, I just want to extend a deep gratitude for Holly from the Quantum Eye for allowing us to use this space for free tonight. Here on the table is a QR code. And this is available if you'd like to make a donation to the Quantum Eye for allowing us to use this space. I know I'm going to be making a donation. This has been a wonderful, intimate, beautiful place to be, and I think it's contributed to the feeling that we all have of just getting to know you a little bit better and feeling like we were able to really talk to you about important things.
Yeah, thank you.
To put it simply. So thank you everybody again. And do you want to stay up here? And there's a table of books right here. So
Sure.
We can cluster or make a line. You guys organize yourselves the way you like. And do you have a way for people to pay for the book?
Yes, I have a QR code for Venmo if that works. Or
Perfect.
yeah,
that works great. Okay. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.